If someone quietly watched your life from the outside, they might assume you're doing fine. You have a job. You pay your bills. You show up every day and do what's expected of you. From the surface, nothing looks broken. And yet, somewhere deep down, there's a persistent feeling that no matter how hard you work, you're not really moving forward. You're busy, but not free. Responsible, but not relaxed. Earning, but not building. That feeling isn't laziness, and it isn't failure. It's something far more subtle. It's the sense of being stuck inside a system that rewards effort but quietly limits escape. Let me start with a simple question. If you stopped working tomorrow, not forever, just for a year, what would actually happen? Would your life continue with minor adjustments, or would everything immediately begin to collapse? Most people avoid thinking about that question because the answer is uncomfortable. Not because they're irresponsible, but because the way modern money works trains people to survive, not to step back and design their lives. And the tragedy is that many people who are intelligent, disciplined, and hardworking never realize they're trapped until decades have passed. I once met a man who had done everything he was told to do. He followed the rules precisely. He went to school, got a stable job, bought a sensible home, and slowly climbed the ladder. From the outside, he looked like success. Inside, he felt exhausted. Not from working hard, but from working endlessly without gaining control. Every raise was absorbed. Every year looked suspiciously like the one before it. When he finally paused long enough to ask why, the answer wasn't a single mistake. It was a collection of habits that felt normal, even responsible, but quietly prevented progress. That's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. The biggest financial obstacles aren't dramatic disasters. They're invisible patterns. Patterns that don't feel dangerous because everyone around you is doing the same thing. You're not reckless. You're compliant. And compliance is far more expensive than people realize. The first pattern begins with how we think about income. Most people are taught that earning more money is the solution to money stress. If things feel tight, the answer must be a raise, a promotion, or a better job. And while income does matter, the trap is believing income alone creates freedom. What actually happens is more subtle. As income increases, expectations quietly adjust. New comforts become non-negotiable. Expenses don't rise suddenly, they creep. The brain normalizes a higher standard of living faster than it learns restraint. And before long, the same stress exists at a higher level. This isn't a self-control problem. It's a psychological adaptation problem. Humans quickly adapt to improved circumstances. What once felt like luxury becomes baseline. That's why people earning twice as much as they did 10 years ago often feel no calmer. The money arrived, but the structure never changed. Without structure, income is just fuel for a faster treadmill. Another pattern hides inside the idea of safety. Many people believe they're being cautious by avoiding decisions that feel uncertain. They stay in jobs they've outgrown because they're familiar. They avoid learning about investing because it feels complex. They delay decisions indefinitely, telling themselves they'll act when things are clearer. But clarity rarely arrives on its own. Time passes whether you decide or not. And staying still in a changing world is not neutral. It's a slow step backward. Fear often disguises itself as responsibility. It says, at least this is stable, but stability without progress is erosion. Skills lose value. Opportunities expire. Inflation quietly reduces purchasing power. The real risk isn't change. It's staying frozen while everything else moves. There's also a deep misunderstanding about effort and reward. Many people unconsciously believe that working hard should immediately justify consumption. Stress becomes an excuse to spend. Long hours become permission to upgrade. This creates a dangerous emotional loop where spending becomes a coping mechanism rather than a choice. The reward feels deserved, but the cost is delayed and invisible. Over time, the habit teaches the brain that relief comes from consumption, not progress. The wealthiest people don't avoid pleasure. They delay it strategically. They understand that short-term comfort can steal long-term flexibility. The goal isn't deprivation, it's alignment. When spending reflects values instead of emotions, money stops leaking away unnoticed. Another quiet trap sits inside ignorance that feels harmless. Many people contribute to retirement accounts or savings plans without understanding how their money actually works. They assume participation equals progress. But money left unattended doesn't optimize itself. Fees compound. Inefficient choices persist. Years pass. And by the time people finally look closely, the opportunity cost is enormous. This isn't about becoming an expert. It's about refusing to outsource awareness. There's a psychological comfort in not knowing. Numbers can feel intimidating. But avoidance has a cost. When you don't understand your money, you give up control. And without control, even large sums fail to create security. Taxes are another area where passivity becomes expensive. Most people treat taxes as an unavoidable event rather than a design problem. They file, pay, and move on. But taxes are one of the largest expenses most people will ever have, and ignoring them guarantees inefficiency. Wealthy individuals don't reduce taxes by cheating the system. They reduce taxes by understanding it. They structure income, savings, and timing deliberately, not to avoid contribution, but to avoid waste. This isn't about complexity. It's about attention. What you don't pay attention to will quietly drain resources. Then there's the trap of comparison. Modern life constantly exposes us to other people's spending without showing their trade-offs. We see the vacations, the cars, the upgrades, but not the debt, stress, or fragility behind them. The brain fills in the gaps with assumptions. They must be doing better. That belief fuels unnecessary pressure. People stretch themselves not because they want something deeply, but because they don't want to feel behind. Comparison distorts priorities. It pushes people to optimize appearances instead of resilience, and appearances are expensive to maintain. One of the most damaging beliefs is the idea that freedom arrives at a future milestone, a certain income, a certain net worth, a certain age. So people endure lives they don't enjoy, assuming it's temporary. Years pass, the finish line moves, and freedom remains abstract. The truth is, freedom is built gradually through margin of time, margin of money, margin of choice, and margin is created by small, consistent decisions that reduce dependence. Real wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about how little your life requires to function well. When your needs are modest and your systems are strong, money stops feeling fragile. There's also a misunderstanding about risk. Many people believe avoiding risk is wise, but avoiding all risk guarantees stagnation. Keeping money idle feels safe, but inflation quietly erodes it. Staying comfortable feels prudent, but opportunity cost accumulates. The goal isn't to gamble. It's to take thoughtful, asymmetric risks where potential upside outweighs manageable downside. Every meaningful improvement in life involves uncertainty. Careers change, skills compound, businesses grow, investments fluctuate. Avoiding risk doesn't protect you from discomfort, it guarantees a different kind of discomfort later. Another pattern appears in how people define success. If success is measured only by consumption, freedom never arrives. If success is measured by control, optionality increases. Control over time, control over decisions, control over reactions. Money is simply a tool to support that control. When money becomes the scoreboard, anxiety grows. When it becomes infrastructure, life stabilizes. The people who eventually escape the middle are not extraordinary. They don't discover secret strategies. They slowly remove friction from their lives. They stop paying unnecessary fees. They learn enough to avoid obvious mistakes. They build buffers. They reduce fixed costs. They let compounding do quiet work while they focus on living. What separates them isn't intelligence, it's patience. They're willing to feel slightly uncomfortable now to avoid being trapped later. They trade urgency for intention. If any of this feels familiar, that's a good sign. Awareness is the beginning of change. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You don't need perfect knowledge. You need honesty about where your money is going and why. You need to ask better questions, not harsher ones. Instead of asking, how do I earn more? Ask, what is silently limiting me? Instead of asking, what can I buy next? Ask, what would reduce pressure? These questions shift focus from consumption to design. Financial freedom isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with applause. It feels quiet. Boring even. Bills get paid without stress. Choices exist. Time opens up, and slowly, the feeling of being chased by money disappears. The trap isn't that people are bad with money. It's that they're taught to optimize for survival, not autonomy. Once you see that distinction, everything changes. Not immediately, but steadily. And that's the real opportunity. Not to escape overnight, but to stop reinforcing the patterns that keep you stuck. Because the moment you stop feeding the trap, it begins to weaken. And in that space, something rare begins to grow. Not wealth for show, but freedom that lasts.